Hello, I'm RubySod, and I'm making a game called Fish Frenzy. Let's get into it. So at the end of the last video, I didn't mention it, but you may have noticed that when I killed the fish, they had death animations. Or at least I think they're called animations. They're actually just particles which spawn when the fish dies. I made it so the particle has anti-gravity, so it'll float to the top of the screen. The way I made it so the particle shows the correct fish is because all of the fish are just one object. How I made them one object is I just made all of the different fish different animations, and when they spawn in, it picks a random animation to play. And when they die, it just sees what their current animation is, and then shows the correct particle for it. Okay, now to get into what I made this time. In the last episode, I showed how I made a background. I couldn't really show you how I moved it down, but I made it functional. After a certain amount of time, you and the camera will go down to the next level. It's not purely visible. When you go down there, it spawns more fish frequently, and it spawns more medium fish than small fish. This took me a while to make, but there's not much for me to show you. With that done, I decided I would make light into the game. At first I didn't really think how big of a change this would be, but after I added it, it made the game feel so much better. There's natural light at the top, but there's also light that follows the player around. After adding the light in, it made me think of jellyfish, so I decided to add them in. It sounded much easier than it actually turned out to be. What ended up happening is that I made a light that would follow the jellyfish, but if two spawned at around the same time, then both of the lights would just follow one jellyfish, which isn't what I wanted. I let more of my friends play it, and they said something about the penguins. I don't know what he said, but it got me thinking about the penguins, and I didn't want them on the bottom levels. So I decided that I was gonna kill two birds with two stones, or I guess two fish with two bullets. So the way the fish spawning works now is that there's a timer, and after a certain amount of time it'll spawn a fish. And it'll pick a number between 1 and 100, and depending on what that number is, it will spawn a fish of that type. For example, to spawn a small fish, we'll say that the number has to be between 1 and 80. If the number that it chooses is, let's say, 17, it will spawn a small fish. But if it's above 80, then it will spawn another type. One of those types being a medium fish. So, this may sound a bit weird, but I made a jellyfish timer. Basically, when it decides to spawn a medium fish, if the timer is above 30 seconds, it will instead spawn a jellyfish. This fixes the problem of two jellyfish being on the screen at once, and it won't spawn jellyfish on the top layer and instead spawn a penguin. Next, I didn't really want to work on the third layer, so I made the start menu. I didn't really add much to the start menu, just a background and the start button, but I eventually added the settings. The settings are really easy to break. If you just spam the gear button, then it'll eventually offset its position by a lot. But I don't really feel like fixing it, so it'll just be there for a while. The only options that I have right now is the cursor type, so then if you don't want a crosshair, you don't have to have it. I also made a high score system, so then it'll record your score, and if it's higher than your original one, then it'll set that as the high score. Your high score doesn't really do much now, because if you exit the game and come back to it, it wouldn't have saved. So don't try to get like a really high score yet. The build for the current version of the game will be in the description below. It should be at the version that I've shown in this video, but maybe when I make my next video it will update, but I don't know. That's all I've added content-wise, but I said in the last video that I would explain why I put those purple particles. Basically, in the lore of the game, there was a wizard, and people didn't like witches back then, so they also didn't like wizards. Instead of burning him alive, they decided to drown him, so they threw him into the ocean. Fast forward to around this year, biologists have found that this wizard has been corrupting all of these fish, and if they don't stop the fish from being corrupt, who knows what could happen. So they send you down there to go and shoot the fish with medicine. That's the reason that they float up to the surface, is that whatever's inside of the bullet makes them go to sleep and makes them float. And there's someone at the top that's collecting all of the fish and purifying them. It's basically a way for me to have a game that isn't just shooting defenseless animals for no reason. And that's about all I've done. So, I will see you all in the next video, maybe. It will be a bit longer for the next Fish Frenzy video because I'm joining a game jam. I'll talk about it more when I make that video, but I will see you in the next video, hopefully.